Got it. Thank you, Valerie. Okay, folks, aren't you dazzled by my technology? And of course, it's on the last screen. All righty. We're getting to screen number 1, folks. Okay. Officially, we're starting now. The League of Northwest Wayne County is pleased to present this update on the changing status of voting rights initiatives and legislation in Michigan. It is an educational program with funds provided from the League of Women Voters Michigan Education Fund. It does not advocate action on the materials provided. The PowerPoint is updated as needed because voting rights in Michigan are in a state of flux. We encourage people to keep checking your trusted sources of information, including the League of Women Voters Michigan website and other resources mentioned in this presentation. The handouts will have all that information. The purpose of the League of Women Voters Educational Fund is to provide nonpartisan information about candidates and ballot issues to Michigan voters, to provide information about the mechanics of registering and voting, to encourage citizens to participate in civic life, and to provide them nonpartisan information and important non-ballot issues. In 2018, the League of Women Voters, along with the ACLU, the NAACP, and others, supported the Promote the Vote ballot proposal that amended the Michigan Constitution. Voting rights are very popular in Michigan. Promote the Vote, Proposal 3, passed overwhelmingly. 67% of the voters voted to approve versus 33% of the voters. In 80 of the 83 counties, this was approved. In addition, the legislature passed and the governor signed Public Acts 350 to 354 of the 2018 proposal to provide for online voter registration. As a result, we have new voting rights we want to highlight. Your eligibility to vote is unchanged. You are eligible to vote if you are, on election day, a Michigan resident and a resident of your city or township for at least 30 days. You're a US citizen, you're at least 18 years of age, and you're not currently serving a sentence in jail or prison. What was new is same-day voter registration. In fact, you may register anytime up to 8 p.m. on election day. You can register in person at your local city township with proof of residency, in person at the Secretary of State, in person at any state agency providing public assistance services to people with disabilities. You may also register online at michigan.gov with your Michigan driver's license, state ID, and offers the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. You can do this up to 2 weeks before election day. You may use mail-in application, which is mailed at least 2 weeks before election day. If you register in person, bring proof of residency. Any of the following, something that shows your name and address. It could be a Michigan driver's license or state ID, a current utility bill, a bank statement, paycheck or government check, other government documents. Electronic versions of these things are okay. Your voting rights before election day. All registered voters have a right to vote before election day by absentee ballot. You must request an absentee ballot through an application, and your signature is required. Absentee ballots are available 40 days prior to the election. Return absentee ballots by 8 p.m. on election day. Of course, military and overseas voters can vote absentee. You can vote in person at your clerk's office or a satellite office before election day. 40 days prior to election day, check with your own clerk for the specifics. You can go to your clerk's office to register to vote, request an absentee ballot, vote it, and return it all in one visit. If you're not sure if you're registered, go to the Michigan website, www.michigan.gov/vote, and you can find out if you're registered to vote. You can register to vote at a clerk's office on election day if you're not registered or you've moved. If you are registered, you must vote in your assigned precinct. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. An ID is required, or you sign an affidavit. That affidavit has penalties of law attached to it if you sign it and you're not eligible to vote. Absentee ballots must be submitted to the clerk or put in a drop box by 8 p.m. Michiganders supported the 2018 voting rights proposal to expand voting rights. And possibly as a result of the Promote the Vote, more people voted in 2020, despite COVID, than in 2016. 5.5 million people voted, more than 652,000 than voted in 2016. This represents 71% of those over 18 who are 18 and over who voted. In 2016, it was only 63%. In 2020, 3.3 million, or 2/3 of the voters, voted absentee. In 2020, we had a close election for president in Michigan, and there has been much controversy. As you can see, we had a closer election in 2016 in Michigan, but we had no drawn-out campaigns saying there was voter fraud. Post-election audits of the 2020 general election were the most extensive in Michigan history. There were 3 types of audits that were conducted. There were precinct procedural audits. These audits are conducted primarily by the county clerks, who are both Republican and Democrat, and involved in the review of more than 200 in-person voting precincts across the state. They are designed to ensure that election officials and poll workers follow the correct procedures in conducting elections in these precincts, which require pre-election requirements be fulfilled and that required records were maintained. The audits also included a full hand count of paper ballots cast in the US Senate race in each of these precincts. The second type of audit was the Absentee Voter Counting Board audit. New for 2020, the Bureau of Elections worked with city and county election officials to review records and procedures in absent voter counting boards in 4 large jurisdictions. The audits focused on determining how many absent voter counting boards were out of balance and could have been reconciled with additional review, and identifying the reasons why counting boards were out of balance. Risk limiting audits was the third type. The state conducted risk limiting audit exercise of the presidential election statewide. Approximately 18,000 ballots were randomly selected for more than 1,300 local jurisdictions statewide, and the result of randomly selected ballots were compared to the statewide tabulated total. The Bureau of Elections also conducted a full hand count audit of all the presidential election ballots in Antrim County. The running of elections is a local responsibility held by Michigan's 1,520 city and township clerks, along with their staff, volunteers, and poll workers that they have hired to work in polling places and perform other election functions. And if you haven't volunteered to be a poll worker, it's a great experience to learn how our elections are run securely. Auditing of elections, which include review of the city and township clerks who ran the election, is performed by city and state officials. There were also numerous court cases, I believe 13, that found no evidence of voter fraud, and the Senate Oversight Committee, chaired by Senator Ed McBroom, a Republican, released a report that said the election was safe and secure. I'm now going to turn you over to Val Nelson for the next few slides.
The reaction to the 2020 election,
Oh, sorry, Val.
The reaction to the 2020 election has resulted in over 100 bills introduced to the Michigan House of Representatives and over 100 bills introduced into the Michigan Senate, including the 39 bill package introduced in March. This is a quick overview of the legislative process. Red represents the Senate and blue is the State House. A bill is initially assigned to the Senate Elections Committee. And then when it leaves committee, it goes to the Senate for a vote. Once passed in the Senate, bills go to the House Elections and Ethics Committee. From that committee, it goes to the full House for a vote. Once passed in the House, they go back to the Senate, and the Senate sends to the governor. The governor has the option to sign or veto the bill. If she vetoes, legislators can try to override the veto with a 2/3 vote. There are 39 senators, 22 are Republicans, 16 are Democrats, so it takes 24 to override. There are 110 House of Representative members, 55 are Republican, 51 are Democrats with 4 vacancies, and so it takes 71 votes to override. The Senate Elections Committee members are Senators Ruth Johnson, Ed McBroom, Curtis Vanderwall, who are all Republicans, and Paul Wajno, who's a Democrat. Hearings started on April 21st and are continuing. They've taken testimony on all 39 bills. Most bills are still in committee. 12 bills have moved. The 12 bills address Dropbox regulations, mailing of absentee ballot applications, use of volunteers, increased identification in order to register or obtain an absentee ballot, and other issues. For up-to-date information, you can go to lwvmi.org. That's our league website. 8 bills were passed by the House and Senate and were vetoed by Governor Whitmer on October 3rd, 15th, and 29th. The governor said the bills perpetuate the big lie and that every citizen has a guaranteed right to vote. The 8 bills vetoed have dealt with expansion of polling places, blocking third parties from accessing the qualified voter file, banning voting machines from being connected to the internet, requiring county clerks to remove deceased voters from the qualified voter file, establishing a timeline for completing reviews of initiative petitions, establishing new identifying information in order to register to vote or obtain an absentee ballot, prohibiting the mailing of absentee ballot applications unless requested, and prohibiting private nonprofit funding for elections. You can get a complete copy of the list of bills, the current status, and the league positions at lwvmi.org. You can look up minutes and testimony by going to senate.michigan.gov and selecting Senate Elections Committee, or house.michigan.gov and selecting House Elections and Ethics Committee. You can look up the bills and see an analysis at michigan.legislature.gov. So what can you do? You can stay informed. Information is regularly updated at our league's website and help show people that the 2020 election was safe, secure, and fair by utilizing the fact checks feature at the Secretary of State's website. The Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, also has an agenda she would like passed. However, it's not been taken up in the Michigan House or Senate. It deals with equitable access, strong infrastructure, and secure elections. Recently, some House bills have been introduced that make some of these changes. Petitions for a new initiative called Secure My Vote are being circulated now, and it seems to be a response to the 2020 election and the belief by some that there was voter fraud. In September, a group called Secure My Vote submitted an initiative petition to the State Board of Canvassers. The board approved the form, and the summary and petitions are being circulated. They must gather 340,047 valid signatures in order to have the State Board of Canvassers verify. This number is equivalent to 8% of the voters who voted for the governor in 2018. This process is used to enact a law that the governor cannot veto. Once the signatures are verified, the legislature can vote to enact the law or put it on the next general election ballot. The Secure My Vote Committee had approximately $85,000 when it filed its report on November 2nd. $80,000 came from one donor, Ron Weiser, chair of the Michigan Republican Party. For more details, go to the Michigan Campaign Finance Statement detail. This slide is a timeline of how the initiative process works. A drafted proposal is submitted to the State Board of Canvassers. The State Board of Canvassers approves the form and the summary. From there, petitions are circulated to gather at least 340,047 valid signatures. 180 days are available for that. Then it goes to the Board of Canvassers, who validates the signature. Then the proposed law is sent to the legislature, who has 40 days to adopt as law or place on the ballot. And then I can't quite see the end of the slide. It goes to the governor at that point, and she cannot veto it if it's passed. Citizens of Michigan may initiate legislation as either an indirectly initiated state statute or directly initiated constitutional amendment. For statutes, if the petition receives enough valid signatures, then the state legislature has 40 days to adopt or reject the proposal. If the legislature rejects the law, then the measure is placed on the next general election ballot. If it has an appropriation, which means if there's money attached to it, there can be no referendum on the law. Remember that a referendum is a direct vote of the people. So if there's money attached to it, there can be no vote by the people. If the legislature approves it, it becomes law 90 days later. The initiated law can be amended by the legislator after adopted through the regular legislative process and must be signed by the governor. Secure My Vote has an appropriation, so there can be no referendum. We don't know when the initiative would go into effect. Once the signatures are submitted and verified, the legislature can approve the law, and it takes effect 90 days after that. We're hopeful that it will not be in effect for the 2022 elections because this process had to be completed by December 31st.
I'm just going to chime in here to highlight the fact that money was attached to this means that it can't be vetoed. We can't do a referendum. This cannot be changed.
The proposal mandates that people disclose partial Social Security numbers when registering to vote. It restricts options for registered voters to verify their identity. Acceptable forms of photo ID would still include a driver's license, state ID card, passport, military ID, tribal ID, or student ID, but eliminates the use of the affidavit. Instead, the voter is given an ID-only provisional ballot. Note that there are penalties for false information on the affidavit now. perjury punishable by a fine of up to $1,000 or jail up to 5 years or both. It further requires voters applying for an absentee ballot to include their driver's license or state ID number or the last 4 digits of their social security number on their application. And it prohibits election officials from sending or providing absentee applications unless asked. Further, the Secure My Vote bans charitable contributions, including volunteer time and donated space, to help administer elections. Note that in 465 cities, townships, and counties received funding from nonprofits in 2020. Secure My Vote states that drop boxes close at 8 p.m. on election day. This is no change from current law. It mandates that offices be open from 9 to 5 for the 5 weekdays leading up to the election to accept ballots, or that drop boxes be made available. It establishes a voter access fund and allocates $3 million for 1 year to provide free photo identification for those who declare need, and allows the legislature to adopt the legislation without a vote of the people and block a people's referendum vote after adoption because of the $3 million appropriation. Just a reminder that currently voters can vote if they sign an affidavit affirming their identity, if they don't have their IDs with them, and if their names are in the qualified voter file. 11,400 or 0.2% of the voters used this in 2020. The Secure Michigan Vote initiative states that if you have no photo ID, you complete a provisional ballot and you have to go to the clerk's office within 6 days to verify your identity to vote in order for your vote to be counted. 7 states have strict voter ID laws like this proposal: Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. If this becomes law, voters cannot vote to repeal it because it contains an unnecessary allocation for 1 single year of $3 million to provide voter IDs for those with hardships. The current cost of an ID is $10, and there are provisions for hardships now. By the way, an official copy of a birth certificate can cost anywhere from $15 to $30, depending on the state. The fees for a new passport or to renew a passport are $135 and $110 respectively. And the price of a replacement naturalization certificate or certificate of citizenship is $345.
As you can see, the appropriation of $10 for 1 year is not going to help people of limited means get ID to vote. Yet it prevents the referendum from being voted on. There are 19 states that have passed 33 bills that have changed voting, and Michigan is set to be another one. There are bills moving at the federal level that may impact the laws passed in those 19 states and the Secure Michigan Vote if it's adopted. The federal House has passed H.R. 1, also known as For the People Act, and H.R. 4, known as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And we're waiting to see if the Senate will pass either bill or the new Freedom to Vote bill. This resource page highlights where you can get more information. There's a publication called Know Your Voting Rights that's available. And also, as mentioned before, fact checks on the Secretary of State's website. And that one is particularly user-friendly. All the arguments you have heard promoting that there was voter fraud, the Secretary of State answers those questions one by one with information and data to refute those claims. So what we have now in our election system and politics is misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is the sharing of false information without the intent to harm. So if you've ever been in a gossip loop, you have been misinforming sometimes. But if you had no intention to harm, it's misinformation. Misinformation can spread when journalists misinterpret something or fail to verify a source or a claim. It also happens on social media. Well-intentioned individuals can easily share or like content that is outdated or misleading and do so unintentionally. Disinformation, on the other hand, is purposely creating and sharing false information with the intent to harm. Bad actors who spread disinformation online have different motivations. It could be they want to do voter suppression in communities of color, spreading mistrust in our democracy, but the common goal is to have their bad information reach the mainstream media. So how to spot disinformation online? Consider the source. Does the URL address look strange? Check the about page on the website. Check the date. Is the story old news? Sharing out-of-date information may not match current events. And cross-check information. Are reputable news sources reporting the same story? Read past the headlines. What's the whole story? Sometimes a headline doesn't match the content. And question emotionally charged content. Disinformation intends to sow division by getting us angry or sad through images or memes. How do we combat mis and disinformation? Never quote the bad information. This only helps to spread the bad messages wider, and studies have shown that repeating bad information, even to debunk it, makes people more likely to remember the bad info and not your good info. Refer to the bad information without repeating it. Say some bad actors are making false claims about the legitimacy of the 2020 election, rather than Representative XYZ says that thousands of ballots were stuffed at the election office. This wasn't true. And here in Michigan, the League of Women Voters was there to prove that it wasn't true. We were down at Cobo Hall. Focus on providing the correct information and, if possible, include trustworthy sources for where to learn more. Have an inoculation messaging. Think of good information like a vaccine. You want to proactively inoculate against anticipated problematic content before it spreads. It cannot be said enough. Do not repeat or quote bad information. The method of showing myth versus fact only spreads the myth further. Find ways to call out the bad information without repeating it. Remember that Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. We're going to get out of the presentation and start answering questions. You may put your questions in the chat, and James will be reading them to the township clerk, and he will be answering them. So let me get out of here. And stop sharing. Okay, James, is Michael aboard? James, are you muted?
Michael hasn't showed up, so.
Okay, do we have any questions in the chat?
No, we don't.
If someone has a question, would you unmute and we will try to answer it for you. If we don't have the answer before Michael gets here, we will get back to you with an answer. No questions? I saw you laughing, Ellen. And I know this presentation was a little wordy. And that's why the handout's going to be important. And Nancy, I will download the handout as soon as I stop talking. I do not know why Michael isn't here. He was supposed to be here at 11:30. And let's see if there's anybody in the waiting room. No, there's nobody in the waiting room. Okay, let me put the handout.
Just say I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question.
Dave Bunch has a question.
I
Okay,
do.
Dave, what's your question? I can't do two things at once, but I'll answer your question if I can before I put the download in.
Okay, going back to the comment that was made, or the statement that was made earlier about laws that are passed attached to with an appropriation attached that cannot be changed.
Correct. When it's a petition drive and it's.
Correct. But my
Okay,
question is, I got the impression that it was only in that year. What about in subsequent years? Can a new petition be initiated to basically reverse or alter that previously adopted law?
no. Because in the original law, the funding was for 1 year was put in there, and actually that appears to be what the ploy was. They had to put some money in, so they put enough for 1 year, and that comes out to $10 per registered voter in Michigan. But you can see, obviously, for the years going forward, that's not going to help anybody get ID to vote.
But my question is, then what about in subsequent years? Since that was only put in as an appropriation for 1 year, why couldn't an initiative be started in a
Because the way the law is reading, it can't be changed because of the appropriation. This is in the Michigan Constitution and hasn't been used since 1945.
Yeah, I know it's
Somebody did their research and found this loophole. Now, in Michigan, our legislature is ruled by one party. But right now, it's looking like this could not be changed if it went into effect. And that's what has a lot of organizations concerned.
But a new initiative could be started, which could work at, in effect, cross purposes to that law, I would think. But anyway, I'll let somebody.
Well, we've been told no, and that's one of the reasons we're doing all these presentations, because most of us didn't realize how devastating this could be for the Michigan voter. We had a ballot proposal that overwhelmingly won to give us these increased voting rights. And by getting a little over 340,000 petition signatures, they're going to be able to undo all that we did. Now think about it. How many times, and I can admit to this, that we literally signed a petition down at Eastern Market or someplace, and we didn't read it all the way through and didn't realize what we were signing. And the fact that secure the vote sounds very innocuous. Who doesn't want to secure the vote? But in fact, it's restricting and rescinding some of the things that we voted for in 2018. Now, this is an informational presentation only. The league is very careful not to mix education and advocacy. We do have a position on secure the vote, and you can go to our website and see that position. We never promote a candidate or advocate for a political party, but we do take positions on issues. And right now we're educating because we're concerned that people do not realize what's going on with secure the vote. And I'm trying real hard to be non-political right here.
Carrie, I posted the handout.
Did you? Thank you, Val. So on the handout, you'll see what the current, on the one side, you'll see what the current voting laws are in Michigan. And then on the back side, you'll see in red what the proposed changes are. And it really breaks down everything that I was saying today. I see our Canton Township Supervisor, Anne Marie Hodak, is here. Anne Marie, do you have anything that you would like to add to the conversation?
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get the sunlight out of here so you don't have to get that weird thing. No, I'm sorry. I did text Michael to find out what was going on. He has 2 little babies, so it could be anything, right? As we all know, having little ones in the house. I know he helps a lot with the kids while his wife also has her own business.
Well, you can also email Michael at the Canton Township Clerk's office. He does answer his email promptly, but you can also put in the chat or send me any questions you may have, and I will get the answers to you.
Yes, and this is very important. You're right. It's very important because as you showed, Carrie, it's very easy to twist the words on something, right? So when you're saying, oh, this is to protect voters' rights, you know, when they ask you to sign a petition, it's really important to really understand what you're signing and see what it does, because it looks like, you know, you can really manipulate something or so people think that it's the right thing to do for voters. But you're right, we had the record numbers, and I know that Michael in our office has been asking for extra funding to look at how we can ensure we have even more secure voting in Canton. He won Clerk of the Year this year. It's from, you know, the state of Michigan, because he trains other communities and how to be secure. So you've got a really good clerk in Canton that can handle these situations, and he is really good at you know, answering questions. But if you have any questions, I might be able to help, or at least pass them on to him if we can't.
And one of the best ways to, if you're nervous about whether our elections are not secure, is to be a poll worker. And for the first time in my life, I signed up to be a poll worker, and I worked the primary in Westland. And yes, I worked that long day, but it actually gave me comfort to see how much care is taken with the votes, and watch people come in and vote. And as I said before, many of our league members were down at Cobo Hall watching the votes being counted, while people were pounding on the window saying that fraud was going on. We have been doing this for 102 years, making sure there are safe elections. We want every eligible citizen to be able to vote. And if secure Michigan vote is enacted, it will restrict those voting privileges that we just enacted in 2018. Okay, any other questions? Or somebody want to make a comment?
Can everybody access the handout that I put in the chat?
That looks.
Maybe a better question, is there someone who said,
Lisa, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, so you just mentioned that the Secure the Michigan vote would undo what we had voted in previously to expand the vote. So why can this petition that's going forth absurd what we've already have in place? What's the difference?
It is strange, but it is in the Michigan Constitution. And as I said, this was something that hadn't been used since the 1940s. And so by getting little over 347,000, I think it is, signatures, which isn't all that hard to do, they are able to bring it to the legislature. And because the Michigan legislature is not evenly split and tilted to one side or the other, they when they vote on it, will vote this through. And the little asterisks or fly in the ointment is because appropriations were added to this. In other words, they put in money for that 1 year funding up to $10 a person to get your voter ID. This can't be changed.
And
So
because
I
of that
think-
appropriation, they can overturn our law.
Yep. What in 2018, 63% of the state voted for. So without, I guess I am expressing an opinion. yes, it does seem inherently unfair that if you voted in 2018 for something along with the majority, that this unused clause in the Constitution, and don't ask me why it's in the Michigan Constitution, I don't know how it got there, but somebody combed through the Constitution and figured out a way that they could do this. So take the affidavit. If you don't have your driver's license or ID with you, you could have signed, and currently you can sign an affidavit under penalty of law that you are who you say you are. Once that's filed, you're allowed to vote. But they do check that. When they bring the votes back to the tally sites, they will compare signatures. Well, under the Secure Michigan Vote, you then have to go, they don't accept your word. They'll let you vote, but you have to go to the county, to the city clerk's office or township office within 6 days to verify who you are. In the reality, people of less means cannot take off from work to go to the township clerk. So you're disenfranchising people who don't have the ability to just pick up and go to the township clerk. There haven't been, in Canton, Anne Marie, can you speak to this? There was one case of voter fraud in Canton. And it was, I believe, a man signing an absentee ballot for his daughter when he was dropping it off. Do I have that correctly?
Correct, yes. Yep, there's
So,
one.
I
in
mean,
Canton.
of the millions of votes that are cast to restrict, especially lower income and communities of color, restrict their voting. The same with Dropbox. Dropboxes proved very popular in this last election. One of the slides showed how many people voted absentee ballot. That'll be restricted. Currently in Canton, an application is sent to everybody asking, do you want an absentee ballot? That'll be prohibited. Volunteering for the elections will be prohibited. So currently the League of Women Voters, we're all volunteers and we work the elections. If we work as a poll worker or poll challenger, you do get paid as everyone else. But I can tell you there are a lot more members who are out there watching ballots being counted for free. So I can't see anything in the Secure Michigan Vote that expands voting rights. It restricts. And this has already been done in a number of states. And that's why on the federal level, the John Lewis bill and oh, Michael just entered. Let him in. So that's why it's so important that you keep up on what's going on. And I know it's a lot of information. He's connecting. Hi, Michael. You're muted. I don't know if Michael's having problems, but he's still muted. Is there anybody that couldn't pick the handout up from the chat and would like me to send it to them? And I have about 50 that I could bring up to the church. You're muted.
Okay, yeah, Judy Franks.
Would you like me to send it to you, or do you want a hard copy that I could, I guess, mail to you, or you could pick up at the church?
You know, I can pick it up at the church.
Okay, I'll leave it on the kiosk in the lobby.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carrie.
Aha. Michael.
Hey, Carrie, how's it going?
I'm punting here, trying to answer questions.
Okay, beautiful. I've got both of the kiddos with me, and so I'm gonna keep my video off if I can.
Okay, I think most of us had those moments in life, although my son turned 49 today. We didn't have Zoom back then.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
questions that was asked, and actually was asked by Dave Bunch. Dave, do you want to ask the question to Michael again? You're on mute, Dave.
There.
Sorry, both of us are on here. Carol was trying to chat while I was, anyway. All right, Michael, how are you?
I'm doing well, David. How are you?
Doing okay. My question, I think Carrie answered effectively, but it was in regards to the voter initiative or citizen initiative that went through or is on it, trying to go through. It has an appropriation attached and does not have to go to the governor for approval. And my understanding is that it then cannot be changed at a later date. I wondered why we couldn't then have a subsequent voter initiative in a subsequent year that could reverse that. But from what I understand, it's in the Constitution the way that it is, and I would think then the only way to change it is to change the Constitution.
Michael, he's talking about the petition drive for Secure
Sure.
Michigan Vote.
Correct.
Correct. Yes. So there's interesting case law on that. I'm not overly familiar with how that all works. I don't know, Carrie, what you had kind of answered with, but it's my understanding that when a law is enacted, and in this case, it would be a voter initiated law. When a law is enacted, it cannot be repealed if there's an appropriation tied to it. But I believe it's by the legislature. I don't know that the residents can't amend the Constitution in a way to invalidate a voter initiated petition. So you potentially could, I believe, in the future, let's say you wanted to amend the Michigan Constitution to say that no ID shall be required for the purposes of obtaining an absentee ballot. That language in the Michigan Constitution would rule the voter initiated petition unconstitutional because that would have gone directly to the voters and be enshrined in the Constitution. You probably don't want to have a constitutional convention right now in Michigan because that would more than likely end up with a number of things being added to the Constitution that maybe aren't good. But anyway, that's my kind of interpretation of all of that.
Yeah, to change something in the Michigan Constitution is a big deal and requires a lot. But it also opens you, if you have to hold a constitutional convention. And as Michael says, it opens to having other things put in the Michigan Constitution that we may not be happy about too. I guess the part that of the Secure Michigan Vote that is, I guess, was surprising to me that a little over 340,000 people could change the will of the people that voted in 2018 on expanding voting rights. And this template, like one of the slides said, was used already in 19 other states, noting that all those other states had Republican legislatures. So they're working their way through the continental United States and Alaska and Hawaii to change these laws in all these states. So you need to be aware. And the handout has all the websites that you can check for factual information. Are there any other questions for Michael? From Teresa Peterson, who is the interim pastor at Geneva Presbyterian. Oh, she got the handout and she printed it. Carol said she didn't get the documents, so they're going to pick it up at church. I'll try to drop it off next time I drive by church. And Gail said, remember that the majority in the legislature is not very voter friendly, so it's unlikely they will reverse the referendum until their mindset changes. Thank you for saying that, because I couldn't say that, that Gail. Michael, do you have any other comments you want to make on elections in Canton?
Boy, I wish I would have gotten on earlier. I apologize for that. So I'm not entirely certain everything that you talked about up to this point, but yeah, with regard to Canton Township and elections in general, obviously we've seen increased participation in the last couple of election cycles, especially increased participation by mail. Hopefully the petition isn't successful, because it would potentially reverse those kind of increased participation. That's something that concerns me. Luckily for 2022, it would not be enacted in time for the purposes of the election. So I'm looking forward to another election cycle of increased participation and people having convenient options for voting. We're doing everything we can to be able to accommodate for how many people choose to vote in absentee ballot now and vote at home. So that's pretty exciting. We are actively recruiting election inspectors or poll workers. If anyone is interested, please, by all means, go on to my website. We have an application process for that. We went to all virtual training in 2020 due to pandemic. I imagine we may provide virtual training for poll workers this time, but I think we'll also do some in person as well, some hybrid trainings. Other than that,
Michael, in the last election, and drop boxes were something that was new, where you didn't actually have to go in and drop your ballot off. In Canton, we always had the slot in the wall where we could drop your ballot off. But in freestanding drop boxes, has there been any indication other than claims that people made that they were stuffed, or were they tampered with in any way that you could tell?
Right, so there's no evidence, and there's been no stories of any ballot boxes anywhere in the country being intentionally damaged or there being any manipulation. A lot of times the legislature, and mostly individuals with from a more conservative bent, who tend to be on, who tend to focus more on security than they do on access, right? That if that's kind of the continuum there, they tend to think of ballot drop boxes being a place that allows individuals to, quote, ballot harvest, right? That's a term that, it's not really a technical term, but it's the idea that an individual might collect absentee ballots that belong to somebody else and deliver them, which is against the law in Michigan. And so there's no evidence of that. And we've had no issues of that. So yeah, no damage to any ballots, no ballot harvesting. And as far as like a fraudulent ballot, it really isn't possible to create a fraudulent ballot because of how we design them in Michigan, or in all 50 states, to be quite honest. You have to obtain a ballot from an election official because we have what's called timing marks. The scanners won't read the ballots unless they've been programmed correctly. They're the appropriate ballot style. Each precinct has a unique ballot style. In Canton, we have 40 precincts. There's 45 precincts in Livonia. Plymouth Township has 17 precincts. And so in order to kind of create fraudulent ballots, you would have to know what the timing marks are for each precinct. And they're decided every election randomly by the printer. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. So to really manufacture ballots, it's really, I would say, not a statistically significant threat. It's probably a 1 in 1 billion or 1 in 1, 500 of a millionth risk factor for a fake ballot to be created. So, and then real ballots are stored under lock and key. So yeah, no, drop boxes tend to be something that are extremely convenient for voters, and especially during a pandemic. And then in Michigan, where we kind of have that 14-day window for voter registration and the ability to vote an absentee ballot early at a local election official's office, it's really convenient to not have people coming in to the office to drop their ballots off, because that frees up the lobbies of all of our clerk's offices just for voter registration and for people who choose to vote a ballot there. So we would prefer, if you ask an election official, that people use a ballot drop box. And yeah, no evidence of any type of tampering. I did see an image of somebody who had ran over one in Colorado with a truck or with an SUV on accident. The SUV was totaled, the ballot box was not, and they were able to rebolt it back into the ground, and it continued to function after that accident. So they're pretty secure.
Well, as we're going to wrap up, I just want to remind people that when this country was formed, the only people that could vote were white men landowners. And in the years, we have added women, people of color, people who don't own property. All of us are affected by the laws and taxes that are enacted by our legislators. So everyone should have the right to vote if they qualify. The League promotes expanding voting rights, and this is an educational session on learning what's happening in the state of Michigan. Valerie?
Well, this concludes our presentation today. Thanks so much for attending, and thank you, Clerk Sechrist, for your insights as well.
I also want to thank Geneva Presbyterian Church for agreeing to allow a presentation, even though it became virtual. And hopefully I see you all at the election time. Don't forget, you can be a poll worker. It's really an interesting job. Have a good day.